Cape Crusaders, please join me in welcoming a very special guest to our show. He co-produced over 75 episodes of Batman the Animated Series, as well as countless episodes for the DCAU. He conceived the stories for Two-Face Parts 1 and 2, Mudslide, Read My Lips, The Terrible Trio, Time Out of Joint, and Riddler's Reform, as well as the co-producer of Batman Mask of the Phantasm, the co-writer of the recent DCAU comic books, Batman The Adventure Continues. Please join me in welcoming Alan Burnett to our show. Alan, how are you doing, sir?
I am doing fine. I'm very glad to be here. Nice to meet you, Alex. Nice to meet you, Will.
Yes,
that's right.
Very nice to meet you. I am also here, everybody.
Will is also here, which I always forget to intro.
Don't introduce me. That's fine. Not
important. So, Alan, my first question for you is a fun one, and maybe you've confirmed this before, but I've got to ask you in person: is the likeness of the character Charlie Collins in the episode The Joker's Favor, is that character based on you? The likeness?
Yes, it is. It is.
Oh,
as a matter of fact, I'm going to shift the camera. Nobody can see this at home, but you see those three cells? Those are Charlie and the Joker in various stages of
awesome
of getting together. Yeah, Charlie was based on me.
One of my favorite episodes. It's in my top 5. That just something about the episode I love so much.
Yeah, it was an episode that introduced Harley.
Yes.
And then she got the costume later on in a subsequent episode. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to do. And Ed Begley Jr. played me in that thing.
So how did the likeness? How did it come about?
I think that Bruce Timm, who did all the models for the characters, thought he'd have some fun with me that time. And unfortunately, he got pretty close to the way I looked at that time. So, but I enjoyed that, and I gobbled up some cells of it as soon as I could. So that was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. Yeah. I in a book I'm recently writing, I have a character called Charlie, and I have at one point somebody say, "Okay, chuckers," just because of that line in that episode. No one will get it when they read it except for my brother, and that'll be it, and they'll be fine.
Yeah, I love that line so much. Yeah, I mean, just Mark Hamill in that episode is top form as the Joker in that episode. He's incredible.
You know, he's just irreplaceable voice for Joker. He's the Joker to me. So
absolutely,
yeah. And Paul Dini, you know, you can always count on a script from Paul to be funny and serious at the same time. And that it was a serious story, but I got a lot of laughs from it. So
yeah, I love it. I mean, you talk about Paul there, and you can count on him, especially with Joker episodes. And we've had a lot of writers from the show come on this podcast. And when we asked them, like, was there ever a character that you wanted to write for? And so many of them had said, you know, I'm not going to say the Joker because that was Paul's. Like, he just did such a great job with that character that, like, it's not even worth me trying to touch it. You know, like someone like Marty Eisenberg wanted to be the Riddler guy because Paul was just rocking it with the Joker. So, you know, why even bother?
I think he did all the Joker stories for the first 85 episodes of that show.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think you're right. I think maybe there's one or two very early ones, like the last laugh when he's on the floating garbage boat and he's poisoning the city. I don't think Paul wrote that, but still, like, those aren't the episodes that people remember. The ones that Paul wrote are the Joker episodes that they remember.
I got on the show like when there were a few episodes into it. And from that point on, I think Paul was writing anytime there was a Joker story, he did it. And it just fell that way. The other people did the other. You know, there's a whole big rogues gallery for the other story editors to deal with, so they dealt with the others.
Absolutely. So you just mentioned, you know, you came on board fairly early on, but they had already started rolling with some of the episodes and such. So I think you've shared this story before, but for our listeners who don't know, how did you become one of the head producers for Batman?
I was brought on because, well, I was asked to do it long before I got there, but I was wanting to get out of Saturday morning and animation altogether, and I was doing some other stuff at Hanna-Barbera at the time. But then I saw the trailer that they did, and I thought, oh, I got to be a part of this. So I joined when they were a few scripts into it, And I think there was just a conceptual problems between the writers and the producers at that time. The producers wanted, or directors, I'm talking about Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski, who wanted to do a more adult show than the scripts they were getting. I mean, that was basically it. And so did I. And it turns out, the show was not a Saturday morning show. This was a weekday show at 3:30. So the audience was older, and you could actually get away with a lot of stuff, even though it was under the category of children's programs over at Fox. I treated it more like a primetime show as much as I could. We couldn't have people getting killed, unfortunately, on the show. But
you just wanted to off so many people.
Yeah, you do. And, so I wanted to do a very serious Batman show. I mean, I was in Saturday Morning for 10 years, and that was plenty. So that's how I got into it. They just needed a shift in focus, and I provided that. And it worked out pretty well. I mean, when I went into it, I remember saying to myself, you're going to forget every rule you ever had in Saturday Morning. Just go with what you want to do. And we did some pretty adult stuff for some of it, at least. I pictured, when you're doing Saturday Morning, it's a sort of 6 to 11. I'm not sure if that term means much anymore to anybody, but the shows used to be on Saturday when kids were off from school. Those were their hours to watch TV, and the appeal was to be to 6 to 11-year-olds. And when I started doing Batman, I said, no, we're just going to shift this all to teenagers. That's sort of the audience I want to go for, 14-year-old boys at least. And we did. We ended up having a wide range of a demographic. I mean, we got the teenagers, we got the kids, we got college.
Yeah, I mean, you got us. I was like 7, at the time, 6 or 7.
I was told that it was popular with 2-year-olds, and the reason is because it's a colorful show. I mean, a lot of it is in black, but when there's color, the color just pops, and so they like the color. The kids, the little ones, like the color, and they like the fact that it was kind of a quiet show. It wasn't coming at you with noise all the time like a lot of cartoons did at that time. So that was what we were going after, and we had a good time doing it.
Yeah,
we wanted to make a show that comic book readers could appreciate. That was the basic thing.
I think I was 2. I was a 2-year-old when it came out, and the first words I ever spoke was Batman. And I know we had the show on, so I'm sure that's probably was something that was interesting to me on the television at the time.
So you were one of the 2-year-olds who liked it, which I'm happy to hear.
So when we had Randy Rogel on the show, he shared his first writing experience for Batman, which was given to him by you, essentially, because you conceived the story for Two-Face. Now, where did the story of Two-Face come from with Harvey having his dual personality?
Well, I've always liked Two-Face. I remember reading my first issues that had Two-Face in it when I was in grade school, and I thought he was the most fascinating character because he had a good side and a bad side, and there's a geometry about his personality that appealed to me when I was a kid. I don't know if that makes sense, but he was the first villain I wanted to tackle when we did the show, and part of my philosophy at that time was that he probably was a split personality before his face got destroyed, and because that makes sense. It doesn't make sense to me that his face got destroyed and suddenly he becomes this psychotic. He was psychotic before it was hidden, but when half his face was destroyed, it suddenly all came out. And I actually I've talked about this at other places, but I called up a psychiatrist friend of mine, and I said, what causes split personality? And essentially, it could be a very small thing. It could be a thing as small as just hiding a little secret when you're a kid that starts to fester and get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I had a fascination with Two-Face. and was happy to have Randy write the show. Randy actually wrote he's an example of where writing spec scripts got you somewhere with the producer. He wrote actually 2 spec scripts, and I thought, and though I didn't use them, although there's one I probably should have used, I thought anybody who could write this fast and this entertainingly, somebody should be on my team. So that's how he got on Batman. But anyway, so that was my philosophy about Two-Face.
Yeah,
and he's a great villain. He's not there's not a lot of stories you can really tell about him, but the stories you can tell about him can be very effective. I just like him a great deal.
And he evolves over the show to tell different stories, doesn't he? I mean, his character changes dramatically towards the end of Batman the Animated Series with the Judge version of the character. So that's why it's like when you read Two-Face comics now, it's never the same 2-note story. It's he does evolve as a character, which is always interesting.
And I just love the seed that you planted with, as you said, he was troubled before the accident, and when we reviewed those episodes, we've been going in production order, not release order. So we reached it in episode 7 or 8 or whatever, and the episodes we had watched, we enjoyed them all, but it was when we reached Two-Face Part 1, we were like, oh, this is the series that we remember now. And I was like, what changed here? And your name was one of those names that was involved in that change. And I know that's why you were brought on, obviously, to kind of like steer the ship in a different direction than they were going.
It went from Saturday morning cartoon to, drama, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I remember Kevin Altieri was the director of that first show, and he was the one who came up with the lightning effect. I don't know if you remember. Harvey's in his psychiatrist's office, and she's trying to heal him, and there's a flash of lightning, and you see the bad side of his face all of a sudden.
A little Easter egg. I love that.
Oh, it was just wonderful, and that was Kevin's touch. He was one of our most creative directors on that show.
He's so we've had him on the show. He came on fairly recently, and I was chatting to him about the Two-Face episodes, and he said that in Two-Face Part 2, the thing that they focused on, that the animation studio, I can't remember who it was right now off the top of my head that did it, actually filmed tsunami rain, and that rain became synonymous in the show, where like I was chatting with Marty Eisenberg, and I think it was like What Is Reality or Silicon Soul, one of those episodes, and he got like the first draft, and the rain came back, and he's like, no, I want Two-Face Part 2 rain. I want that rain. Like that, I don't want the rain you gave me. And it's just this whole thing that Kevin did in those episodes with that animation studio became this like, and it is a fantastic looking rain. Like it looks like it's really raining in that episode, and it's real rain. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So characters like Clayface and Riddler were such strong characters that I personally feel weren't used as much as they could have been in the show. They had just a few episodes, but you got to work on 2 of the best episodes, in my opinion, for those characters, which was Mudslide and Riddler's Reform. Can you remember where the stories came from some of those episodes? Like, we'll start with Mudslide, with him being helped by a fan of him when he was an actor, and she's like trying to basically put him back together. And it had a very sort of like 50s horror feel out on an island where, she's like encasing him in this like bodysuit and such like that. I love that.
That's what they were doing in the comic books by that time. There was a Clayface was put in sort of a glass suit, or I should say transparent suit. And I thought, if he was falling apart, that would be an interesting story. And a lot, almost every outline that I wrote, I really wanted to write a script. It was just too much. There wasn't enough time to do it all. So, but I thought that would be interesting. And I remember coming up to the end, the idea that water could possibly destroy Clayface, or it was his kryptonite. So, and that's where that story sort of came from. The Riddler's Reform, I'm not sure
So that was Randy Rogel that wrote that.
He wrote that.
Yeah, and it's my favorite Riddler episode because I love how he's like working with this toy company, and you think he's gone straight, but he's just obsessed with still being like outsmarting Batman, basically. And I love the end of the episode where he puts Batman in a death trap, and Batman escapes, and Riddler doesn't know how, and he's in Arkham. Like, how did he do it? Like, I have to know. And the performance from John there is just incredible.
I haven't seen that in a while. The thing that I loved about that episode was that it got away from the usual Riddler routine, which is he comes up with a riddle and they talk about, okay, what could be the answers, and this is the answer, and sure enough, that's the answer. Batman comes up with the answer, and so there's a sort of a linear thing that you get a little tired of with the Riddler. But this broke that. This was a case of the Riddler giving riddles and not realizing that he was doing it. He couldn't help himself. And and when Batman realizes that becomes the way to get him. Yeah, I like that episode. I think that's the best Riddler episode we did.
Yeah, it's great. So was the villain Scarface always planned for the show, or is that something that came an option later in production?
No, I love Scarface. I love characters that have two sides of personalities like that. I like, Scarface is sort of a
you like mentally troubled individuals. I can tell.
Yeah, I do. I do. And but I've always wanted to do Scarface. It's one of my favorite episodes. I mean, it's one of the most lush looking of our episodes. It almost looks like it's painted on black velvet. And it's just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful episode.
The score is incredible too. The music in that episode, that jazz, is just so good. I love it.
Yeah, it's great. And Joe Lansdale wrote it. I mean, we had an outline for him. He doesn't particularly like to write outlines. He likes to take a story in outline form and find the script. He likes to find I think he would skip outlines altogether and just try to find the script, trying to find the story in the script. But we got it to him. He was friends with Michael Reeves, who was one of our story editors. And I remember it was at a time when I had to have a good script. The assembly line of production was getting a little crowded, and Joe Lansdale sent in the script, and I read it really quickly, saying, "Oh, please make this be good." Well, it was just spectacular script, and the dialogue was just beautiful, and we used him on some other stuff whenever we could. But he is one of my favorite writers that I've worked with. And I worked with him on, I mean, this is news. He actually wrote a Swamp Thing DVD for us that I so wanted to do.
What, for animation?
Yeah, for animation. And this goes back in like 20 years ago.
So this is a movie?
It's a movie, yeah.
Wow.
And but the people who run the video department decided that they wanted bigger stars than Swamp Thing, and so it got shuffled off to the side. But it was a great script, and he wrote it, and he's just one of my favorite writers.
So was that just sitting on a Warner Brothers shelf somewhere, just collecting dust right now?
That's right. Somebody needs to look it up again because it's terrific.
Yeah, I love Swamp Thing.
I think are they doing a Swamp Thing movie? Is that on the boards?
Yes, I believe that was part of James Gunn's announcement for the DCU. Was Swamp Thing was going to be much later down the line, but that was the last announcement of the first phase, if you want to call it that, of all of these movies. So maybe they'll end up digging out that script, or hacking it and taking bits of it.
Could always turn it into a comic.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Oh, but except it was based on a comic, an existing comic.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about The Terrible Trio, an episode that seems to be lumped in with some of the lower rated episodes, such as The Underdwellers or I've Got Batman in My Basement, which as we said off pod, are two episodes that we actually really enjoyed on a rewatch when reviewing them. So would you ever, with the Terrible Trio, besides asking you how you came up with that and how that episode came to be, would you ever consider revisiting these characters and like bringing them back?
Well, I mean, I'm in charge of no shows today, but I must confess to you, the Terrible Trio came at the end of I think at the end.
Yeah, it was one of the last episodes of the series. Yeah.
So I had started to move on to other stuff. I've never seen the Terrible Trio.
No way! Really?
I've never seen it, and and I was told it wasn't, the greatest thing in the world. And then I had the audacity to bring the Terrible Trio back for a subsequent Batman. I forget which show we did it for. It was Batman Beyond, I believe. I think we did the Terrible Trio with Batman Beyond. I believe so. And I think in that case they were taking some sort of mutagen to change themselves to
animals. I've never put two and two together that they were the sort of, like, I'm sure they're not the same people because it's in the future, but it was like
it's a completely different story.
Trio, right?
Yeah. And I've never seen that show either.
So it turns out, if anything with the Terrible Trio, isn't it? You're just not going to watch it, I guess.
I guess not, but you know what? You got me intrigued. Maybe I should, after 25 years or so, maybe I should get onto Warner Max and look at the episode. I should probably do it and see how bad it really was.
Well, you've done it twice. It's called the Terrible Trio. I think you need to do it one more time.
Yeah.
It's one of the first comic books I ever read of Batman had the Terrible Trio in it. I must have been 9 or 10.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It exists in the comic books. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. No, I didn't make that up out of whole cloth. Believe me.
I mean, like, I haven't seen the episode in a while because I'm waiting on a lot of the episodes for the podcast when I come to review it. But the last time, I think the last time I watched it with you, and we both didn't remember it. And we're like, this is fun. It's just rich snobs like who think they own the world. And the best thing about it is at the end, they're trying to bribe Batman. They're like, we'll give you $1 million. And you can't bribe Batman because he's richer than them. I love that. I thought that was a fun ending. So maybe we're the only people in the world that like it. Or maybe when we on a rewatch, it will be different. But right now, I think the Terrible Trio is not so terrible. There we go.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Hints of Alfred Hitchcock's Rope in it as well, but that's just me, I think.
Really?
Yeah,
well, now you've got me doubly intrigued.
Well, just the rich people trying to get away with stuff. Essentially, it's just it's very not exactly that, but it's there.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because we just reviewed. Speaking of like odes, we just reviewed The Cat and the Claw Part 1, and I noticed some odes to Moonraker. I'm a big James Bond fan, so I noticed some odes to Moonraker. Like there's a little piano jingle to open all these trapdoors and like reveal these big sets of like, this is my master plan. I reached out to Kevin and he hasn't gotten back to me. He's probably looking at the message like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? So I know there was lots of influences with you guys going on. I suppose my question is, what were some of your like fondest or proudest things that you did for the show? Or like, is there any influences that you took and you're like, oh, I'm injecting it in this, or I'm putting it in this, that's my stamp.
I'm a big cinema fan. I'm a big Hitchcock fan. And you'll find little Hitchcock touches throughout from me, I think. Touches, stealing. That's what it is.
What's your favorite Hitchcock film?
Oh, that's a good question. I think probably Psycho. But I have a great fondness for most of his 50s movie and a great fondness for 39 Steps and The Lady Vanishes. And I love North by Northwest. I saw him on 2 occasions by chance.
Oh, wow.
He was the first American Film Institute screening or what do you call it? Just a film festival held in Century City, and they debuted Family Plot there. And we were all standing, looking down a first floor area, a lobby, open lobby sort of area. We were on elevated walkways, and they were, and we were waiting for Hitchcock to come because it was going to be screened. I had tickets to it, and they brought in. There's like 4 guys were carrying in this coffin, and they set it down. And I thought, oh my God, Alfred Hitchcock's in that coffin. And they opened it up, and it was film cans for Family Plot. and I thought, okay. And but then he came, and people applauded, of course. And he was with his wife Alma. I actually saw Alma, and then I went in to see the movie. My wife and I got tickets. And Hitchcock came out in front of the audience and did an introduction to his film. Then he left, and then they showed the film. And that was my first time I've seen him. The second time I saw him, there was a big Hollywood celebration over, of all people, Henry Kissinger. And it's like all the Republicans in Hollywood decided to get together to honor him. And this was, again, at the Century City Hotel, where there's this huge indoor lobby. And I was a page at NBC that time. This was in the 70s. And I'm sitting there guarding a door. They didn't want anybody to go into the banquet room yet. They wanted all them to be drinking and out in the lobby. And that room was packed too. And it was packed with people like Jimmy Stewart and Kirk Douglas and Johnny Carson. I mean, it was just amazing. And so I'm sitting there in front of this door, just watching these guys talk, and the audience, the crowd sort of separated at one point. And I'm looking through the crowd, and they're like 70 feet away is Alfred Hitchcock. He's sitting down, and I was just like, my God, the reason I'm here is because of him, because I was such a huge fan of his. And I so wanted to leave that damn door and go and say hello, but I didn't know what I would say. Hello, you. Thanks to you, I'm a page at NBC. I didn't know quite what to say, and I thought, well, maybe a moment will come. And then they opened the doors, and all these Republicans flocked into the banquet room. And Hitchcock was one of the last to go. And again, I guess his wife was with him too. But he was being he had bad legs. He was sort of being held up by his assistant and another man. That man turned out to be his chauffeur. And I got to talk with, there was no going up to him. He just looked,
too intimidating as well, I'm sure.
It's intimidating, and it's just he was an old man. And but I talked with the chauffeur who had some stories to tell, and essentially he said that Hitchcock directed Family Plot from the limousine. And I thought, that's interesting.
Wow.
But those were the 2 times. And, later on, I'm a big fan. I went to a screening of Blackmail, which was a film in the 1920s. This was when I was actually working at Hanna-Barbera. And I went because Patricia Hitchcock was there. By this time, I'm not sure. Hitchcock probably died by then. I'm not sure. And so I went and saw Patricia Hitchcock and a guy named Charles Bennett, who wrote the screenplay or the play that was based on, that Blackmail was based on. He was in his 90s. He was very old. But she was very lively and flighty. I really liked her. And this is a stupid memory, but as I was leaving with my friend, it might have been Randy when I think about it. Randy Rogel. But as I was leaving, you heard this clip, 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 and it was Patricia Hitchcock heading for her car. She went past us before we could almost realize that it was her. And it's the stiletto of her high heels. I'll never forget it. I don't know why. It's just one of those memories. And then later on, I went to a USC celebration of Alfred Hitchcock, which featured the granddaughters. There are 3 granddaughters continuing the legacy. and Ernest Lehman was there. I didn't realize it was Ernest Lehman at the time. And so I've seen the whole family. But anyways, I saw Ernest Lehman in a room where they had posters, and we were the only two people there. And we talked a little bit, but I didn't realize it was Ernest Lehman. He had a very severe Van Dyke beard at the time, and round glasses, so he looked very Trotskyite to me. And but we talked a little bit, and afterwards I found out who he was, and I thought, holy smokes, here's the guy who wrote one of my favorite screenplays, North by Northwest, and I I could have cornered him and talked a lot about that film in and of itself. But coming back to Batman, there was an episode called Perchance to Dream, which has a lot of Vertigo in it. There's the tower, the third act, which takes place in the tower, is all about Vertigo to me.
Oh, I've never realized that. Yeah, with Mad Hatter, that's amazing. That's right. Yeah, that is a real Vertigo.
And we'd steal some other stuff. There was a show we did where Batman swings into a woman's apartment. He just swings into an apartment. He's chasing somebody, and there's a woman who goes. She goes, "Oh my!" And then she gets a good look at him and goes, "Oh my!" Well, that's a steal. That's a steal from North by Northwest. Cary Grant's trying to escape his hospital room, walks out on a ledge and goes into another room, and there's a woman who suddenly sits up in bed and says, "No, stop." And then she sees him and says, "No, stop." And
I know what episode that is as well. That's the I think it's when the Scarecrow poisons the football players, and he's rigging it so he can place bets and win. And
wow, Batman's, you know the show. I'd forgotten.
Yeah, well, I have this ridiculous knowledge of the show, Alan. So I mean, it's the reason I did this podcast, obviously. And yeah, that's cool that moment is an ode to Hitchcock and North by Northwest. That's awesome. So what but the other part of that question is, what is some of your proudest achievements of working on the show?
Well, I'm just, we set out to do a show that comic book fans would like. And we took the best of Batman over the years and put it all into the show. And it was a group effort. I mean, one of the first things I did when I got there was we had like a week's work, just all the writers and all the producers and directors, and just talked out Batman. Two outlines. I mean, I should say 2 Bibles have been written. There was an earlier one which was pretty strong, and then there was one that seemed to have been written to make the network feel more at ease with the show.
Right.
But I don't like Bibles, and we just talked out the show, and that's how we turned that show into what it was.
Yeah, I heard that the writers' room, if you want to call it that, was quite the fun place to be when conceiving episodes. And we've had writers on the show come in, and and Paul's like, and then there's this condiment king, and he's got like mustard and ketchup guns, and he's like playing it out and stuff like that. It sounds like a great time, man, and that probably is one of the many reasons why the show is so good, because of like all of that passion and love and fun that you guys had making the show.
We were all fans,
Yeah, absolutely, and it shows. So with these characters, you've recently returned to the world of Batman the Animated Series over the last few years. You've been co-writing with Paul Dini, Batman the Adventure Continues. And I've read volume 1 and 2. I haven't gotten around to 3 because I'm waiting for 3 to be full, like the full collection. I love volume 1 and volume 2 and what you guys did. So how did this book become a thing with you guys?
A guy named Andy Marino, who was an editor at DC, called me up and said,
Will's nodding his head. He knows who Andy is.
Andy gave me my first job at DC Comics.
He's great, isn't he?
Yeah, he's awesome.
He's wonderful to work with.
Lovely guy.
Yeah. So, and he had called Paul too, but Paul was like, he sort of was backing away. He wasn't that interested. And I said to Andy, I said, well, Paul and I work together really well. And I would love to work with him again on this. Do you mind if I give him a call? And so I called up Paul and I said, "Come on, let's do this thing. It's perfect for me because I'm retired now. So it's like what were we doing? 6, 7, maybe 8 stories a year, including the Christmas stories that we would do. And it's just, I mean, and we take our stories and we'd split the comic in half. And I would write 10 pages. Paul would write 10 pages. Sometimes he'd do the first 10, then I would do the next 10. And we would talk on the phone, and it was just perfect for me. And Paul,
was it like the old days?
Yeah, it was like the old days. And Paul and I have similar feelings about Batman. I think we feel that if you don't approach Batman with a certain amount of amusement, you might be missing something.
Yeah.
We like to put a little wherever we can, put a little laugh here and there regarding him. So, Batman's an interesting character, and I've said this before. You can do so much with him. You can do horror stories, you can do comedy stories, you can do mystery stories, of course, and of course just thrillers. There's just a whole gamut of stories you can do, and if you don't take him seriously, there's a danger. You'll get into camp, and that's sort of a dead end after a while. And if you take him too seriously, you get into too much blood and guts. You're forgetting about the kid aspect to Batman. He's a guy who's a fantasy, really. So that's a dead end too. But there's just this whole wide range where you can tell different kinds of stories and use him to tell them. So
absolutely, with the book, you've got to introduce some new characters into the DCAU that you didn't get to do on the show. For instance, you got Jason Todd and the Red Hood. You've got like Court of Owls. What's been some of your favorite stories and characters to introduce in these books?
I've enjoyed Straight Man, who's the Joker's foil.
The new henchman.
New henchman, yeah. Originally when I think about it, there was a toy aspect to what we were doing. There were certain characters that they wanted us to introduce into the Batman animated universe that would figure into some toys, and the toys never came about. And I'm trying to think who those characters were. We were dealing with that in the first 5 issues. And then suddenly that was dropped and we were just telling our own stories. My favorite story that we've done was maybe the last story that's been out. It's the Harley story where Bruce Wayne discovers that he and Harley Quinn were dating the same girl at the same time back before he was Batman. And that turned into a very funny story to me. Paul and I had a great time with that.
Oh, cool! I can't wait to read that one. That sounds fun. I really loved the one with the corrupt mayor.
Yes.
I think you guys were kind of. Were you guys touching on political agendas at the time? Not political agendas, but without getting into politics. A previous president who's no longer president, I saw a lot of similarities between that president and this mayoral character.
Yeah. It's the way it turned out. We actually weren't modeling him on Trump, but he did stuff that became pretty Trumpian, and pretty, and my governor DeSantis. I live in Florida now. And and there were some things that DeSantis was doing. He was creating his own police force in Tallahassee, and I thought, and this was after our book came out, but it just mirrored life imitating art. I guess that's what it felt like.
I saw a lot of similarities, and I thought it's just great to introduce this new character into this universe. What I love is that it's not your typical supervillain. It's not like Batman can just swing down, punch the dude in the face, and off he goes to Arkham. You know, it's like he's on the side of the law, and he's really smart in like the worst ways possible, scary at points. And I really enjoyed that whole story. I thought it was really good. And the fact that he got Gotham on his side, you know, and he's just this like snake is a great angle. I really enjoyed that. So that was my favorite of the books that you guys wrote so far.
Yeah, I agree with you. That was probably that was like a 3-issue story, and it worked out well.
Absolutely.
That began with the character called Muscle, and then we introduced the Mayor Mayhem. That was Paul's idea. He just had the idea of this character called Mayor Mayhem, and that's how that story grew.
Cool. So we've had quite a few guests on this show, and I guess the segue here is that when I read any comic, not just the ones that you guys wrote, but any Batman comic, the voice I hear in my head is Kevin Conroy when I'm reading Batman in comics. And we've had quite a few guests on our show who have spoken about working with Kevin and shared some great stories. What are some of your standout memories of working with Kevin?
Well, Kevin was a wonderful fellow, and with a wonderful voice. He had one of these voices that was strong and authoritative, and yet it was warm. I mean, if you listen to his performances, you sense a warmth about Batman that I don't think other actors could have conveyed as well. You know, he and I got along well. I mean, I really liked him, and he was. I actually saw him in a play 10 years before I ever, maybe 12 years before I ever met him. He was, and I didn't realize that I had seen him. It wasn't until after we worked for a couple of years, he said, you know, I did Death Trap in Los Angeles with Brian Bedford. And I thought, whoa, I saw you. And he did not get along with Brian.
Apparently, okay.
Yeah, they apparently had a falling out. And he was happy not to be working with him after that. Although he wouldn't say that publicly. And I thought, well, that's unfortunate because, you know, in that play, they're lovers. Right. But no, Brian Bedford was not his happiest memory in the theater, I think. But I just liked him very much, and he took Batman very seriously, and he was a great appreciative guy when it came to the fans. I mean, and they would light up when they saw him. Many times I would be on a panel, and he'd be coming from another panel, and he'd be coming to the room just a little bit late. Then as he came in, we would announce, "Oh, there he is," and he would volunteer. He would start shouting out, I am vengeance, I am the night, I am Batman," in that great bass voice of his that filled the room. I mean, he was a theatrically trained actor, and people would just go nuts. He was just a great fellow. He went from New York to Los Angeles back and forth, and had an apartment in in New York, which I'm told had a room that was dedicated to Batman. I would have liked to have seen what that room looked like, but it had all kinds of paraphernalia. So he took it very seriously, and he was good to the fans, and the fans loved him.
Absolutely. We had Diane Pershing on a little while ago, and she spoke about how, you know, going to the cons he was the centerpiece, right? And then you would have like Lauren Lester, Diane Pershing, and like other people that obviously were big characters in the show, but it was nothing without Batman being there. And she said that, you know, now he's gone, it's not the same. And, you know, and she said the same thing. He would come out on stage and everyone would light up, and you wouldn't know he was sick, you know, and no one really, you kept it private, which was obviously completely up to him, and that's what he wanted to do. And she said he was just going until like the end, you know, until he really couldn't go anymore. But that was something that he loved to do, and I think that's just like one of the best traits ever as a person to have that. And and that's why he is, to me and to so many people around the world, they're Batman. He's just an amazing Batman, and he's an amazing person. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Switching gears here, do you have any memorabilia from your time working on the show? We love to do this where we ask people. You were talking about some cells in the back there. You don't have to take them off the wall, but yeah, what do you have as like little treasures?
Okay, just hold on 1 second.
Of course.
Well, it's not here, but where it is? Oh, here it is. I hope. I have this. And I'll have to describe it for your audience. I have this. This is when I left Warner Brothers. This is a drawing that Bruce Timm made.
Wow.
Batman
so it's
crying.
Batman crying. So for all our listeners, it's like kind of like a more cartoony version of Batman who's like, what would you call that? Like just like a tiny little like, I don't know. There's a type of character name where they're like, he's almost Smurf sized, I guess. Is
Chibi.
like
Chibi's the word.
Chibi. Thank you. I knew you would know that. And he's just crying his eyes out. And I guess that's because you leaving was the saddest thing to happen to Batman. Is that what the drawing's about?
I guess so, but we appreciate it. I mean, it's beautiful, and I have to put it up someplace. I had a place for it, and then things got switched around, but I'm going to put it up soon. I put this on Facebook when people send me happy birthday notices, and I wrote back, thank you so much. You've made me so happy. And this particular crying Batman up as
it's very Mad Magazine, that image.
Yeah.
I've also got, strangely, this picture of my hero.
Oh, there he is, Hitchcock.
This is a painting. This is a photograph taken by Gabby Rona, who I guess is semi-famous. I don't know. This was a picture that was given to me by the merchandising people, because we sign cells, and we get part of the deals that we get some cells free from them. And I saw this picture of Hitchcock in the Warner Brothers store, and I said, that's what I want. And they got it for me. It's actually, to look at that picture, you wouldn't think, but it was for sale for almost $800 in the store, and that was 30 years ago.
Wow.
I just say that because the stores are now gone, and maybe stuff like this is one of the reasons. I don't know, but I've got this, and I had this up. I have to find. I'm switching around all my art in my office. So.
Well, if you need to get rid of some stuff, Alan, I'm happy to take off your hands. I've got an empty wall behind me that the animation cells from Joker's Fable would look great behind me right there. So just send them to me. That's fine. I don't mind.
Well, no. I have one other thing to show you, but I have to lift up my computer, and
okay.
And these are you can see these are lineups
character designs. Yes,
character designs for Batman and Superman, the old Batman, the new Batman, and I'm doing a terrible job of this. And I just have them all across my walls.
Wow, that's
so cool. Thing too. So that's me. Those character lineups are great.
Yeah.
And all done by Bruce Timm. So we all got all the producers got copies of that. So it feels like a one of a kind thing. But
absolutely, yeah.
Or four of a kind thing.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for coming on. For all of our listeners, where do you want to direct them? Do you want to direct them anywhere? Are you big on social media?
No, I'm not. I'm on Facebook if they want to try and get on Facebook. But that's about it. And buy the comic book. We're writing the last one of this season. And as a matter of fact, I could get the script from Paul today. And it's
the fine. Is it so? Are you guys done after this volume?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
But we were told we were going to be done the last season, and it just kept going. So I don't know. If it goes, it goes. If it doesn't, I've had a great time, and it's been so much fun working with Paul and Andrew, and there are other things. Paul and I have another iron in the fire right now, which I can't talk about, but maybe next year you'll have us on for that.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Alan. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, and thank you, Will.
Yeah, I know I've been quite silent on this one. I don't know why, but yeah, thanks very much, and thanks for coming on.
I've been blabbing my mouth too much. That's why.
No,
not at all. Thanks, Alan.